I'd given 7 years of my life to Halcyon Strategy Group. Not a lifetime, sure, but long enough to know the rhythm of the elevators, the way the carpet muffled your steps when the partners were meeting upstairs, and how the Monday morning espresso always tasted faintly burnt. I was never the rising star. They didn't call me a prodigy or a thought leader. What they did call me was consistent. Reliable. The rock of ops, one senior manager once said. That rock got thrown out the window on a Wednesday. My name is Marianne Holt. I'm 34 years old, and until last month, I was the operations lead for Halcyon's Western Division. Not flashy. Not glamorous. But I kept the wheels turning, internal systems, vendor coordination, logistics, client communications. I ran the ship while others got the glory. And I never once dropped the ball. Until I supposedly did. It began like any other day. I was in the middle of prepping final notes for the Kepler Tech account, a major renewal that would determine whether we kept one of our largest long-term clients. The deck wasn't even finished. I had passed the materials on to Mia, the intern I'd been mentoring, for formatting. She was new, 23, bright-eyed, and way too eager to impress everyone, especially leadership. I liked her, though. I saw parts of my younger self in her. Or thought I did. Then came the heels. Not mine. Tapping across the floor in that deliberate, stiletto staccato rhythm I knew too well. I didn't even need to look up to know who it was. Evelyn Castor, our regional director. Fierce, polished, and 5 rungs above me on the corporate ladder. She'd been with Halcyon only 3 years and had already left 2 former managers in her wake. She didn't rise through the ranks. She slashed her way through them. Trailing behind her was Mia. Eyes down. Shoulders tense. Boardroom. Now, Evelyn said. No greeting. No explanation. Just that clipped tone she reserved for people about to be scolded, or worse. The hallway seemed longer than usual. Mia followed us in, then lingered by the glass wall like a shadow. Evelyn tossed a printout onto the table in front of me. Explain this. I glanced down. It was a report. A live version of the Kepler Tech deck. My stomach twisted. There was a tab at the bottom, one labeled Internal Risk Modeling, Do Not Share. It was still in there. I didn't send this, I said immediately, my voice steady but tight. It was a working draft. I passed it to Mia for formatting. She was supposed to. She said you approved it, Evelyn cut in. I turned to Mia. Her eyes flicked up, then away. No confirmation. No denial. Just silence. Mia, I said gently, I told you to double-check the sheets and remove internal tabs. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. Evelyn folded her arms. Do you have any idea what kind of liability this creates? I swallowed hard. It wasn't final. That's not the version I would have. Doesn't matter, she said, already walking to the door. The client is threatening to walk. We may lose the entire Kepler Tech account because of this. And you expect me to believe it wasn't your mistake? I have the original email, I said quickly. Timestamped. You were always good at cleaning up messes, she snapped, loud enough to cut the air. Just not good enough to avoid making one. Then she turned and did something I hadn't seen coming. She opened the boardroom door, stepped out into the main office, and clapped her hands. Everyone, she called. The team looked up from screens and coffees. Heads turned. Brows furrowed. I want you all to be aware, Evelyn announced, voice calm and cold, that Marianne Holt has been terminated effective immediately due to misconduct involving client data. Please forward any relevant account tasks to my office. Silence. Then the rustle of someone adjusting a chair. The beep of a coffee machine. The sound of my heart splitting in two. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just stood up, collected my mug, the one with the chipped handle, and the tiny desk plant I'd kept alive for 4 years. I placed both in a recycled paper box from beneath the printer. I walked out the front doors and onto the sidewalk, the wind whipping my blazer as the city moved around me like I no longer existed. The worst part? It wasn't shock. It was the clarity. Because this wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Evelyn hadn't called HR. She hadn't asked questions. She hadn't even offered the courtesy of a private conversation. This was a hit job. Clean, calculated, deliberate. And Mia? She let it happen. That evening, I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes from the office. My phone buzzed every so often with messages I ignored. I stared at the ceiling as my tea went cold beside me. I thought about the week before, when I flagged an unusual pattern in vendor payments during a routine audit. 2 invoices from the same supplier. Identical descriptions. Different totals. Different dates. But the same work. When I raised the concern to Evelyn, she waved it off. Admin mistake, she'd said. I'll handle it. 2 days later, I lost access to the payment dashboard. System maintenance, she claimed. Now here I was. Fired. Shamed. Ghosted. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. I reached for my phone and dialed the number of a law firm I'd saved a year ago, just in case. The receptionist answered smoothly. Feldman and Rivera. How can I help you? I cleared my throat. My voice came out calm. Too calm. Hi, I said. I need to speak with someone about wrongful termination. And potentially internal fraud. The office was gone, but the clockwork precision of my life still ticked. Thursday morning, I woke at 6:45 a.m. as always. No emails to check. No meeting prep. Just silence, interrupted only by the clink of my spoon stirring coffee and the hum of my laptop booting up. I hadn't heard back from Feldman and Rivera, yet. But my gut told me it was only a matter of time. And in the meantime, I had work to do. I sat at my kitchen table, opened my personal cloud drive, and began digging. I didn't always trust Halcyon's VPN. Too slow. Too finicky. So I had developed a habit, purely practical, never malicious, of saving work copies on my own drive. Not full reports. Just drafts, backups, snapshots of in-progress files. What I found was damning. The Kepler Tech deck, dated 3 days before the email Evelyn had waved at me, was clearly marked. Preliminary, do not distribute. And attached to it? An email I'd sent to Mia. Hi Mia. Here's the draft. Please double-check all sheets and remove any internal notes before forwarding. This is a work in progress. Thanks. My heart thudded. I had proof. The mistake wasn't mine. Not by negligence, not by accident. The only thing I'd done wrong was assume someone wouldn't use me as a human shield. I'd just started organizing the files when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring once. Twice. Then answered. Hello? A familiar voice, quiet and breathless, slipped through. Marianne. It's Mia. I froze. My fingers hovered over my keyboard. She continued, her voice no louder than a whisper. I didn't know she was going to do that. I swear. Evelyn told me you'd signed off on it. I was scared. I didn't mean for. Why are you calling me now? I asked, not angry, just tired. There was silence on the other end. Then she said, because I think she's going to do it again. To someone else. And there's something you should see. 30 minutes later, she was sitting at my kitchen table. No makeup. Hair in a tangled ponytail. Hoodie sleeves pushed over shaking hands. Her tea sat untouched in front of her. I almost didn't come, she said. I didn't think you'd even let me in. You brought your laptop? I asked. She nodded and turned it toward me. I took a screenshot, she said. The day after you were fired. I didn't know why. It just felt off. It was an internal memo. One I'd never seen. Departmental restructuring notes, dated 2 weeks before the Kepler Tech incident. Right beside my name was a red note. Pending replacement, begin onboarding, M. Lee, Mia. My breath caught. You were going to replace me, I said, the words as bitter as they were flat. Mia nodded. Evelyn told me I was being fast-tracked. That it was part of her leadership mentorship program. I didn't know she meant this. She planned it before you ever hit send on that file, I said, sitting back. Mia looked like she wanted to disappear. I think she's done this before. A guy in procurement. Name was Nolan, I think. Left right before I started. No one talks about it. I remembered Nolan. Quiet. Detail-oriented. We worked on compliance together 2 years ago. 1 week, he was leading a supplier reconciliation initiative. The next? Gone. No goodbye email. No exit notice. Just a personal leave no one ever followed up on. I grabbed my laptop and started digging through archived Slack threads and old project files. There he was. Nolan Chen. And just like that, nothing. Access revoked. Email bounced. No trace. The next morning, the city woke to drizzle, gray and thin like fog dragged down by weight. I sat with my second cup of coffee, the mug warm between my palms, the hum of traffic a dull undercurrent to the quiet in my apartment. Then came the knock. Not the urgent kind. Not frantic. But cautious, like the person on the other side wasn't sure they should be there. I opened the door to find Mia again. Her eyes were bloodshot. No makeup. A file folder in her hand and a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there yesterday. She knows, she said before I could ask. Evelyn? I asked. Mia nodded. Called me into her office. Told me not to speak to anyone. Not HR. Not you. Not even friends. I let her in, shutting the door behind her. She's scared, I said. Good. Mia sat at the dining table, rubbing her hands over her face. Then she offered me a full-time position. High salary. New title. All starting next Monday. I stared at her. She's buying your silence, I said flatly. I know, she whispered, her voice cracking. But it's too late. She pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. She left the room during our meeting. I hit record. I hesitated only a second before hitting play. Evelyn's voice filled the room, smooth, composed, arrogant. We can't have people digging into every little mistake. What matters now is who's loyal. I've protected this firm's reputation for years. If that means cutting a few loose ends, so be it. I sat back slowly. That's not just damage control, I said. That's premeditated. Mia looked up. Will it help? It'll bury her, I replied. I forwarded the clip to Eleanor, then picked up the phone. She answered on the first ring. You're not going to believe this, I said. By the afternoon, Eleanor had looped in a forensic auditor and a former ethics officer from a similar case she'd handled 2 years ago. Her email was crisp and surgical. This audio will be used strategically. Not yet. But soon. Continue gathering. Clarissa is unraveling. Let her. And unravel she did. That evening, I received a message from Brian. Subject, I think I'm next. He'd been placed on administrative review over vague compliance inconsistencies. 10 years of clean records, no formal complaints, and now, suddenly, scrutiny. I raised concerns last week, he wrote. She knew. She's coming. I sent his email to Eleanor. Another dot in the pattern. Another breadcrumb leading straight to Evelyn. Then I stared at my screen, hands trembling not from fear, but from fury. This woman didn't just fire me. She had built an entire system out of fear. Out of silence. And now? That silence was cracking. One voice at a time. Friday morning came with a jolt. An official statement from Halcyon's board hit internal emails just after 8 a.m., and Mia, still technically employed, forwarded it to me. Subject, Operational Transparency and Conduct Review. The language was full of corporate neutrality, but the subtext was clear. The board had initiated an independent legal investigation into management decisions, ethical concerns, and internal conduct processes. They were rattled. I imagined Evelyn pacing in her corner office, wondering who talked. Wondering who was watching. By noon, Eleanor called. They're requesting a meeting, she said. With you. Already? They're nervous. The moment the audio lands on counsel's desk, they'll move to contain it. What's our strategy? I asked. We let them talk, she said. Then we press play. The following Monday, I walked through the same glass doors that had once slammed shut behind me. Everything looked the same. Receptionist smiling nervously. Elevator lights flickering slightly. That weird sculpture in the lobby no one liked but everyone pretended to appreciate. Except the air was different. Heavier. As I passed the open bullpen, a few heads turned. People didn't look away fast enough. No one laughed this time. I walked into the conference room, Eleanor beside me, briefcase in hand, posture like armor. Inside sat two senior board members, one HR rep I barely recognized, and an external investigator wearing a tie too tight and a face too blank. Evelyn wasn't there. Coward. Miss Holt, the investigator began, thank you for joining us today. Eleanor didn't wait. My client is here out of professional courtesy, she said. We expect her to be treated with respect, something she was denied during her termination. The investigator nodded. Understood. Then came the questions. What happened with the Kepler Tech file? Who was responsible? What did I know about the vendor invoices? How long had I held access to internal ledgers? I answered everything, clearly, calmly, professionally. I cited timestamps, referenced email chains, even read from the memo Mia uncovered. Then, without a word, I slid my phone across the table. May I play something? I asked. They nodded. I pressed play. Evelyn's voice filled the room again, smug, composed, damning. Cutting a few loose ends. No one spoke when it ended. The HR rep scribbled something. The board member's jaw tightened. The investigator looked like someone had punched him in the chest with a velvet glove. We'll need to authenticate that, he said. Do it, Eleanor replied. In the meantime, we'll be filing a formal whistleblower disclosure. You can cooperate, or obstruct. But Lizzie won't be silent again. When we left, the air outside felt crisp. Clean. And waiting on the steps of the building was Mia. They pulled me into, she said. I told them everything. The fake training track. The rewritten files. The promotion bait. I smiled, tired but real. You did the right thing. No, she replied. You did. I just finally followed your lead. That night, Brian sent a message. Evelyn's been suspended. The board's expanding the investigation. Past terminations being reviewed. They're calling it a culture audit. Whatever you started, it's working. And as I sat there, the glow of the screen washing over me, I finally let the truth settle in. We'd turned whispers into thunder. The quiet ones had found their voice. And this time, we weren't backing down. This is a pattern, I said aloud. She identifies someone who knows too much. Creates a fool. Removes them. Then promotes someone pliable. Mia's voice trembled. She's falsifying vendor payments too. I blinked. What? I overheard her 3 days before you were fired, Mia said. She was arguing on the phone with someone from accounting. Said the numbers didn't match. Then she said, just duplicate the last payment file and call it reconciliation. I didn't understand at the time. But I do, I said, standing. So will my attorney. I pulled out a flash drive and began transferring everything. The Kepler Tech file. The draft email. The screenshot. The memo. Everything I had. Mia sat silently, watching. After a while, I asked, why are you really helping me? She hesitated. Then she said, because you're the only person who ever treated me like I belonged. You answered my questions. You trusted me with things. You didn't make me feel stupid. And I let her use me to destroy you. There was nothing I could say to make that okay. But the honesty, raw, exposed, made something settle in me. Softened, maybe. She's going after Brian next, Mia added. Brian from Risk and Audit. He raised questions about some discrepancies in last quarter's compliance logs, she said. She's been having closed-door meetings with HR ever since. I stared at her. This wasn't just retaliation anymore. This was structural abuse. A machine. I opened my email and attached everything to a new draft addressed to eleanor.hughes@feldmanrivera.com. Subject: It's bigger than me. Then I hit send. And I called her. She picked up after one ring. I have evidence, I said. And a witness. That evening, I stood on my balcony, watching the city bruise into twilight. The air smelled like cold steel and dust. Distant sirens echoed through the narrow alleys of old buildings. But for the first time in days, my heart wasn't racing. It was sharpening. Focused. Because I'd been the convenient one. The one who stayed late. The one who didn't complain. The one who smoothed things over. But now, I was something else entirely. I was the one holding the truth. It didn't feel like victory. Not at first. The investigation into Halcyon Strategy Group moved like a slow, patient wave, unseen at first, then surging all at once. Within 3 days of our meeting, the firm went quiet. Emails turned clipped. Meetings got postponed. Evelyn's office remained locked, the blinds drawn like a secret that didn't want to be seen. On the 4th day, a memo arrived. Official. As part of Halcyon's commitment to internal integrity and operational transparency, an independent firm has been retained to audit departmental leadership, financial reporting, and compliance processes. Beneath the jargon, everyone knew what it meant. The storm had arrived. Evelyn Castor, once the face of strategic growth, had been suspended. Temporarily, the firm said. But the silence around her was permanent. I wasn't there to watch it unfold. I followed everything from my apartment, my inbox, and from quiet text messages passed between a growing circle of allies. Mia updated me constantly, now completely untethered from fear. Brian, too. His review had been postponed indefinitely. And then came the ripple effect. A former finance assistant emailed Eleanor anonymously with records of falsified spreadsheets from 2 years earlier. A junior team lead admitted he'd been pressured to change data labels in the CRM system. Even Nolan, the ex-employee Mia mentioned, the one who disappeared, reached out from another state. I thought I was crazy, he wrote. She made me think it was my fault. Thank you for proving it wasn't. We had cracked something bigger than we'd imagined. This wasn't about a single file. It was about a culture. One built on intimidation, secrecy, and fear disguised as efficiency. That Monday morning, I got an email from Halcyon's legal department. Plain, clinical. We are requesting your presence at a formal resolution meeting. Representation is welcome. I sent it to Eleanor. Her response came fast. We're ready. Bring your spine, not your anger. I laughed when I read it, but my palms still sweat the entire way to the meeting. Walking into the firm's downtown headquarters again felt surreal. The same glass walls. The same fake marble floors. Only this time, the silence in the building wasn't mine. It was theirs. We were ushered into a sleek conference room on the 18th floor. The room Evelyn used to lord over like a throne. But she wasn't here. Instead, seated across the table, 2 board members, 1 external legal advisor, and a new face, a woman in her late 50s, silver bob, calm eyes. Thank you for coming, Ms. Holt, she said, extending a hand. I'm Miriam Vale, interim CEO. Eleanor gave her a nod. Let's begin. What followed was not a negotiation. It was a reckoning. They confirmed the findings so far. Irregular payment approvals. Unauthorized file access changes. Coercive HR practices. Multiple anonymous complaints buried by prior management. I answered their questions with clarity, never bitterness. And then, finally, Miriam slid a printed letter across the table. It was an apology. A formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing. A complete retraction of my termination. A reinstatement offer with full benefits, seniority, and bonus eligibility. And the line that hit hardest. We recognize that Ms. Holt acted with integrity, foresight, and professionalism. We deeply regret the treatment she received, and we thank her for bringing these issues to light. It wasn't signed by Evelyn. She no longer worked there. She'd been terminated for cause. No severance. No exit package. Just a single internal announcement. Ms. Castor is no longer with the organization. 2 HR managers were also dismissed. 1 board member quietly stepped down. Halcyon was restructured from the inside out. New ethics protocols. External auditing. A task force on retaliation prevention. Then came the offer. Ms. Holt, Miriam said, "We'd like you to lead the new Integrity and Accountability Initiative." I paused. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. But my answer was already forming in my chest. "No," I said softly. "Thank you. But no." Miriam nodded slowly. "May I ask why?" "Because I'm tired of fixing messes someone else created," I replied. "I want to build something better." And I meant it. I joined a nonprofit 2 weeks later. One that advocated for ethical workspaces, employee protection, and whistleblower support. They didn't ask me to relive my story, but when I offered, because I needed to, they listened. Then they asked me to speak. And I did. First at a round table for women in leadership. Then at a university panel on ethics in business. Then to HR directors, compliance officers, interns still unsure of their worth. And every time, someone stayed after. Someone with a story. Someone who whispered, "That happened to me, too." Mia left Halcyon soon after. She found a junior strategy role at a firm known for transparency. We met for coffee and sat for hours. She told me she still felt guilt, still dreamt about that boardroom moment. "You taught me that strength doesn't always have to be loud," she said. "Sometimes it's just staying when everything tells you to leave." Brian now leads Halcyon's compliance team. I hear he starts meetings with one rule. We speak up. Or we stop the meeting. 6 months later, Halcyon released a public statement. They acknowledged a pattern of leadership abuse and a failure to protect employee voices. They outlined reforms. Apologized, vaguely but officially. Praised the individuals who came forward. I read it. But it didn't stir much in me. Because I didn't need their public apology to know I was right. Justice doesn't always arrive with headlines or confetti. Sometimes, it comes in the form of silence, the good kind. The kind that means no more cover-ups. No more gaslighting. Just policies rewritten in the place where someone once whispered, "Don't say anything." Then came the letter. A thick envelope. Hand-signed. From Miriam herself. Inside, an invitation. Halcyon was launching a new leadership program. One focused on ethical decision-making, integrity-first management, and cultural accountability. They were offering me the keynote speaker role. I stared at it for a long time. Then I remembered Eleanor's voice. "You didn't just survive, Marianne. You rewrote the playbook." So I accepted. I walked into that conference hall wearing navy blue, not as armor, but as truth. I stepped up to the podium, looked out at the crowd of young professionals, fresh hires, tired lifers. People climbing. People hiding. And I began. They once called me convenient. Quiet. Easy to overlook. Until I wasn't. I told them everything. How I'd been silenced. How I stood up. How the system cracked. And how we, every quiet person with receipts, brought it all down. Then I ended with this. You don't have to burn the building to the ground. You just have to leave the door open behind you. So the next person knows which way is out. The room erupted. But I didn't speak for applause. I spoke because I could. Because now, my voice, once dismissed, was the loudest in the room. 1 year later, everything was different. But not in the way I used to imagine revenge might feel. There were no red carpets, no headlines. No vindication served up on a silver platter. Instead, there was sunlight streaming into unfamiliar offices. The soft buzz of conversations that didn't rely on whispered fear. And the quiet satisfaction of knowing the right story had finally been told, Loud enough, clear enough, and for long enough that others were now telling it, too. I stood in the lobby of the Veritas Foundation, my new home base. A nonprofit dedicated to protecting whistleblowers, investigating corporate abuse, and reshaping workplace ethics from the inside out. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't flashy. But it was real. On the walls hung framed letters from people who had come forward, some with names, some without. Stories that echoed mine. Lines like, "Your courage helped me speak. Because of your story, I knew I wasn't alone. I left. I'm safe now. Thank you." These weren't just testimonials. They were roots. And I was learning how to grow a forest out of what had once been ash. Mia visited often. Not as a shadow of guilt, but as a friend. She'd blossomed in her new role, and she was now helping her firm implement anti-retaliation training using real-life case studies, mine included. We'd sit on the rooftop garden of the Veritas office with coffees in hand, looking out over the city we'd once felt buried in. "I still remember your face when Evelyn made that announcement," she said one afternoon, eyes flicking toward the clouds. I smiled. "I remember the sound more than anything. The silence after." Mia nodded. "It's funny. Silence used to mean obedience. Now it feels like strength." I looked at her. "It means space. For truth to speak." Brian called next. The compliance team at Halcyon had fully turned over. New protocols were in place. Anonymous reporting had tripled, which in the world of ethics wasn't a red flag, it was a sign that people finally felt safe enough to speak. "Thought you should know," he said during one call, "we named the new training room after you." I blinked. "You what?" He laughed. "The Holt Room. A little plaque near the door that says, 'Silence is not safety.'" I had to sit down for that one. Months passed. The nonprofit grew. I was invited to panel discussions, universities, and corporate summits. And at every stop, someone would find me after, standing a little apart from the crowd. Sometimes it was a woman with tired eyes and a trembling cup of coffee. Sometimes a man in his 50s, adjusting his wedding ring while trying not to cry. They all said the same thing. I thought I was the only one. And I'd say the same thing back, so did I. Then one day, I received an envelope in the mail. Heavy, cream-colored paper. The return address was Halcyon's new HQ. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar, but the signature inside wasn't. It was Miriam Vale. She was stepping down as interim CEO, passing the reins to a new leader, someone from outside, someone fresh. But before she left, she wanted to invite me back. Not to return, her letter said, but to recognize. They were holding a commemorative event to mark the completion of Halcyon's internal rebuild, new leadership structure, audit policies, mental health resources, a restructured HR department, and most notably, the Voices First program, an internal ethics and reporting initiative. The keynote? She wanted it to be me. My first reaction? No way. Why revisit the battlefield? But Eleanor, still my lawyer, still my friend, said something during our weekly check-in that stuck. "You didn't just walk away, Marianne. You lit a path behind you. Now go show people where it leads." The day of the event, I wore dark gray slacks, a white blouse, and no armor. No suit. No mask. No anger. Just truth. I stepped into a room that used to tower over me and found it had shrunk. Not in size, but in fear. The chairs weren't lined in silent rows. They were arranged in a circle. People greeted each other with nods, not stiff handshakes. I even recognized two junior analysts from my former floor. One waved shyly. When I stepped up to speak, I didn't need a script. "My name is Marianne Holt," I began. I was once called convenient. Quiet. Easy to ignore. Until I wasn't. The room listened. Not with politeness, but with purpose. I was terminated without a fair hearing. Publicly shamed. And told that my silence was professionalism. But what they didn't know was that silence can also be a spark. It only needs air to turn into fire. I told them everything. Not the vengeance version. Not the cleaned-up HR version. The human version. I spoke of pain, of betrayal, of those nights I couldn't sleep because Evelyn's words echoed louder than my own thoughts. I spoke of Mia, of her bravery, not her mistake. I spoke of Brian, of Nolan, of every person who thought they were alone. Then I ended with this. You don't fight fire with fire. You fight it by refusing to let it spread. By naming it. By stepping into the room and saying, "That's not okay. And I will not be quiet about it." The applause wasn't explosive. It was steady. Consistent. Like the beat of a drum leading an army that finally knew which direction to march. After the speech, Miriam approached me. She handed me a plaque. Not a trophy. Not a token. Just 5 words. Thank you for the match. It felt like closure. But more than that, it felt like ignition. That evening, as I walked back home through the city's dimming light, I passed a small cafe with a poster taped in the window. Workplace Harassment Workshop, RSVP today. A girl barely older than Mia once was stood at the counter, speaking confidently to a couple in line. And I thought, this is how it changes. Not in boardrooms. But in conversations. Not in firestorms. But in sparks. A week later, I returned to Veritas and pinned a new photo on the office wall. Just a snapshot. Me, Mia, Brian, Nolan, smiling, tired, changed. Below it, a handwritten note. The quiet ones spoke. The loud ones listened. The world turned. Let it keep turning. And with that, I got back to work. Because this story wasn't just about what was broken. It was about what we were finally strong enough to rebuild. Together.